to reject the chaos and division of Donald Trump, to turn the page and pursue a new way forward that protects our freedoms and defends the American values we all believe in. There's a place for you in the Harris-Walz coalition, and we will continue working to earn your support. Liz Cheney adding her high-profile name to a growing list of current and former Republicans whose assessment of the stakes of this election have led to one inescapable conclusion: their support for the Democratic presidential nominee. Now, for Cheney herself, who supported Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020, her breaking point was, of course, the January 6th insurrection. Here's what she said on the eve of Trump's trial in the U.S. Senate.
What we already know does constitute the gravest violation of his oath of office by any president in the history of the country. And this is not something that we can simply look past or pretend didn't happen or try to move on.
And it was comments like that that cost her her political career. And unlike just about all of her colleagues in the GOP who saw it the same way, who we know now from great reporting and some hot mic moments clearly understood Donald Trump's culpability and role in inciting the deadly insurrection, they either didn't have the appetite to pay a political price or didn't have the courage to defy the ex-president. But Liz Cheney helped drive the congressional investigation that uncovered so much of what we now know about the Trump coup plot, and all of it, again, at the cost of her own role in House leadership and eventually her seat in Congress.
Be there, he instructed them. Will be wild. As you will see, this was a pivotal moment. This tweet initiated a chain of events. The tweet led to the planning for what occurred on January 6th, including by the Proud Boys, who ultimately led the invasion of the Capitol and the violence on that day. His response was to say they can march to the Capitol from the ellipse.
Something to the effect of, take the effing mags away, they're not here to hurt me, let them in, let my people in, they can march to the Capitol after the rally's over.
Donald Trump made a purposeful choice to violate his oath of office, to ignore the ongoing violence against law enforcement, to threaten our constitutional order. There is no way to excuse that behavior.
Now, what's politically important is that Cheney becomes a really critical part of what's been coined by pollsters and political analysts of a permission structure for other voters who might see themselves in part of Liz Cheney's story and then go on to pull the lever and vote for Vice President Kamala Harris in November. Here's a little bit more of what Cheney said last night at Duke University.
I think that it is crucially important, and I would say especially to my fellow conservatives, that we think about the stakes and that we think about the extent to which we have a duty to put our country and our Constitution above partisanship. We all have that duty and responsibility.
Vote for Kamala Harris as an act of duty and patriotism. That coming from Liz Cheney is where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Republican Congressman, now an MSNBC political analyst, David Jolly's here, plus political strategist and MSNBC senior analyst Matt Dowd is here. We start, though, with former January 6th Select Committee member, Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California. Congresswoman, your thoughts to Liz Cheney's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday?
Well, I'm proud of Liz. We worked very hard together on the January 6th committee. She and I are not the same politically. She's a conservative Republican. I'm not. There are a lot of policy issues we don't agree on. But one thing we do agree on is the rule of law and protecting the Constitution. And that's why we worked so hard on the January 6th committee. And I think her statement is going to be important for a lot of people. She is so steeped in the Republican Party. I remember there were meetings that we would have during the January 6th committee, and we were in a conference room, and as we were sitting there, I looked on the wall and I realized there was a picture of her father, and the president on the wall. Well, I mean, that's her roots. She is so Republican, and that she would say the only way to honor our Constitution is not just to not vote for Trump, but to vote for the only real alternative, Kamala Harris, is significant. And I think it's brave on the part of Liz. And once again, something I deeply respect about her.
I love everything that you're saying. And it's important to point out that, you know, I worked for her father, George W. Bush, and I was a squish. I was a squishy California Republican. Matt Dowd can attest to that. They were not. And there were lots of instances where, you know, I was sort of viewed, not distrustfully, but skeptically by folks closer to the Cheneys on the ideological spectrum. What seems to have developed, though, and really been punctuated by the vice president's convention, especially that fourth night when she formally accepted the nomination, is that a vote for Harris and all of these Republican endorsers are making an argument that it's the only patriotic thing to do, that it is unpatriotic at this point to support Donald Trump. What do you think about that coming from Liz, who has the goods and the receipts because of her role on the Select Committee?
Well, I think it's obviously true. And Adam Kinzinger actually spoke at the convention, making the same. You know, Trump knew he lost the election. He's actually just recently admitted that on a podcast. He summoned a mob to Washington. He knew they were armed, and he sent them to the Capitol to overturn the election. I mean, what could be more unpatriotic than that? He wanted to overthrow the vote and upend our Constitution. There's no way to square that with the rule of law and patriotism. As Liz said in her statement, this has never happened before in American history, where we had a president who refused to honor his oath in this way. And so for those who are focusing on policy issues, you know, the policy issues can ultimately be solved. But if we don't have a democracy, there's no vehicle for solving them. So that's really what's at stake here.
Matt Dowd, I want to show you more of what Liz Cheney had to say last night, because her journey is instructive. She cast a vote for Trump for president in November of 2020. He would go on to deny his defeat, incite a deadly insurrection, and she would lead the investigation with Congressman Benny Thompson as the chair of that committee, and with Congresswoman Lofgren on that committee, all of them working to reveal the evidence that DOJ seems to have picked up and run with in their own indictments of Donald Trump. But she also outed the Republican Party. And she described their dishonor as a stain that would live forever. Here she is talking about her private conversations with Republicans who said if no one would have found out about it, they might have voted to impeach Trump, too.
Just judging from, you know, my personal experience, you know, there were many members who told me that they would have voted to impeach, you know, if it had been a secret ballot. You know, the private conversations that Republicans have, you know, often reflect the reality of the danger of Trump, which, you know, in many ways, and I mean, like, admittedly, I'm not in a lot of those private conversations anymore, but I think it's a really important point. Like, you know, to be in a situation where you recognize privately the threat that he poses, but rather than explain that to your constituents, explain it to voters, tell the truth about it, you know, you're just sort of crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. I mean, the way politics works is that you actually have to go and convince people. And so I don't think there's any excuse for, you know, for people privately suggesting that and then publicly supporting him.
This, to me, Matt Dowd, is the most sort of underappreciated element of the death of the Republican Party, which she went on to say as well, that it used to feel, if you were on TV calling Donald Trump a threat back in 15 and 16, like you were crazy. You're the only one that saw it, and that was a strategy. But what Liz Cheney helped out is that everyone saw the same thing. Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, Liz Cheney, they all saw the same thing. And that what made Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are different from McCarthy and McConnell is that Liz Cheney had the courage to say it and was willing to pay the price of her own political career to do so. It is an amazing thing about Liz. It's a disgusting thing about the Republican Party.
Well, yeah, and yeah, it's gutless. Obviously, at the least, it's gutless and cowardice, and at the most, it's an upheaval of our constitutional order in this. I mean, I'm amazed at this. I mean, I know Liz like you know Liz, and I did debate prep for her father with her back in 2004. And you might have been the squishy Californian, but I was the former Democrat from Texas, so I wasn't much higher on the level of conservative republicanism in that. That she actually, and she didn't say this, but she basically intimated this, that there is more room in the Harris-Walz coalition for principled conservatives than there are in the Republican Party. Think about that. She basically said the coalition of Vice President Harris and Governor Walz has more room for principled conservatives than the current Republican Party here. And I think what Liz has recognized is she voted for Donald Trump twice. She voted in 2016 and 2020 for Donald Trump. I think, like many Republicans, and Adam Kinzinger for a while until he figured it out, thought the problem was fundamentally Donald Trump. And what I think they've discovered is Donald Trump was the proximate problem, right? He was the most apparent problem. But the problem ran much deeper because the Republican base has moved into Trumpism. And that what I think she fundamentally now recognizes in this. And why it moved is what she alluded to. Why it moved there is because not only did the other Republicans not stand up to Donald Trump, what they did was they amplified lies of Donald Trump to the base. And so they had a point in time, I think, where they could have dealt with this by telling the truth to their voters. They didn't. And by not telling the truth to their own voters, they allowed this to grow like a virus. And the virus has now grown because of the untruths that were told by other Republicans, not just Donald Trump. And when that happens, they created this monster that, in my fear, is even if he's defeated this year, and it's a great step towards democracy, there is still a ton of work left because 40% of the country now believes the lies that Donald Trump and other Republicans have told them.
Which, as the Congresswoman alluded to, David Jolly, Donald Trump doesn't believe. We know that Donald Trump knows their lies. He admitted on tape this week that he lost the election by a hair or a whisker. I don't remember what he said about it. So what Liz and Adam Kinzinger also reveal, I think, is the fools that McConnell and McCarthy and all these Republicans make of the Republican voter.
That's right, and they're doing it by ringing the alarm bell of danger in front of the faces of McConnell and McCarthy and others. And, you know, I take a little nuanced view of the Cheney endorsement and the Kinzinger endorsement, but in its narrowness, it is hugely impactful. And what I mean by that is I think since 2016, there have been a lot of different lanes working adjacent to each other to beat Donald Trump. The widest lane was the Democratic Party, who all along opposed him. But as early as 2015 and 2016, there were Republicans who said no to Trump for his racist, xenophobic immigration language, for Access Hollywood, for flaunting the rule of law, I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and so forth. That was one lane working within itself. There were others that had personal fitness reasons to oppose him. There were some with specific ideological reasons related to, say, fiscal responsibility. But Liz Cheney and Adam